Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. We are just hours from the 2018 midterm elections, as you well know, and the noise levels are becoming almost unbearable. Suddenly everybody's shouting and posturing and trying to scare and bully you into voting for this or that candidate. It's all very loud. But pause for a second and consider what you are not hearing, what is missing from this cacophony. For starters, there is hardly a word about Russia. Remember that dastardly Vladimir Putin and the collusion plot that hacked our democracy? Whatever happened to that? And while we're at it, how about Brett Kavanaugh? Does that name ring a bell? What about his high school yearbook and his purported teenage drinking problem and all those gang rapes he supposedly committed? What about those? Those were the biggest stories in the world not so long ago, 24/7 on the other cable channels. Those stories were going to define this election. They were going to define this entire historical era. Everybody on television told us that. And now they are just fading memories. It turns out they were sideshows. The midterm elections were never going to be fought over Vladimir Putin or Brett Kavanaugh or just about anything else we spend most of our time talking about. This election, like all elections, was always going to turn on issues that actually affect the life of the country. This year, there are three big issues: immigration, the economy, and nationalism. The first is the most obvious. Immigration determines who lives next door to you. It determines who works in your office, who chooses your leaders. There is nothing more fundamental in any country than the question of citizenship. Whatever Donald Trump doesn't know, he definitely knows this. He's been talking about immigration for 3 years now. For all of that time, official Washington has been trying to make him stop.
The way Donald Trump has been conducting this campaign, attacking brown people, making up stories about, possibly George Soros funding caravans that are still, 800 miles away to try to scare white voters.
In other words, shut up, racist. But Trump will not shut up. So they have changed tactics. The new line is, immigration doesn't really matter. The threat is hyped. Only dumb people and bigots care about borders. By the way, parties of both sides seem to believe this. Paul Ryan's office let it be known to Politico this morning that the Speaker of the House begged the president last night to stop yammering about this caravan from Central America and start talking about something important like Paul Ryan's tax bill. That's preemptive blame shifting, obviously. If Republicans lose tomorrow, Paul Ryan can point the finger at Trump rather than accept responsibility for not funding the wall that voters said they wanted. But it's also a ludicrous position to take because it's untrue. Immigration does matter. If, for example, Arizona and Texas go to the Democrats tomorrow, immigration will be the reason. Those were Republican states until the population changed. So no matter how much you lie about it, immigration is inherently important, and voters understand that. If you want people to stop worrying about the border, maybe you should secure the border. Then it won't be an issue. But people are also worried about other things that Washington doesn't notice or think is important. Here in Washington, the economy is synonymous with the stock market. Markets have boomed for 10 years. There are entire cable channels devoted to chronicling that boom. Here in Washington, the assumption is that the economy must also be booming. But the truth is that after a decade of stocks going higher, the effects, the positive ones, are still not very obvious outside select zip codes on the coasts. In Middle America, many young people understand that they will almost certainly make less than their parents made. That is a reversal of the American dream. They know they won't be able to buy cars or houses. They're not getting married. They're not having kids. Our current economic system makes it more difficult than ever for families to form. Our middle class is becoming unable to reproduce itself. Washington should be absolutely panicked about this. It is the most basic sign of failure, their failure. But nobody in either party seems to care. Their answer is just to import new families from other countries. So maybe it's not so surprising that young people say they like socialism, because what we have now is not working for them. And unless we fix it, we may get actual socialism, which will be a disaster. And that leads to the third issue of this election, which is nationalism. Now, despite what you are hearing day in and day out, nationalism is not a racial category. It has nothing to do with race or ethnicity. Nationalism is the belief that leaders ought to put the interests of their own countries above those of other countries. It's very straightforward. The president himself declared himself a nationalist the other night. Watch.
They have a word It sort of became old-fashioned. It's called a nationalist. And I say, really, we're not supposed to use that word. You know what I am? I'm a nationalist, okay? I'm a nationalist.
Trump's a nationalist. So in normal times, the President of the United States announcing that his main goal is protecting the United States would not qualify as news, because until about 10 minutes ago, every leader of every nation state throughout history has been a nationalist almost by definition. Franklin Roosevelt was a nationalist. So was Abraham Lincoln. So was Mahatma Gandhi. So was Nelson Mandela. Nationalism has always been the rule. And why wouldn't it be? And yet suddenly it's an abomination.
Nationalist. Use that word. We're going to talk about that word tonight. It is a favorite of the alt-right and is loaded with nativist and racial undertones. And globalists, well, globalists have been used as a slur of sorts, sometimes even against those in the administration, often with anti-Semitic overtones, which has happened to make the president come right out and embrace nationalism openly and claim that mantle. What has happened here?
What are you trying to say as President of the United States, that you're a nationalist? Americans know what that means. It's not even a dog whistle anymore. It's a bullhorn.
Dumb people repeating the same talking points. So the message is nationalism is now profanity, the word itself. Twitter and Facebook will surely be banning the term if they haven't already. But why? What exactly is going on here? Why are they so intent on stamping out not just the concept, but the very word? It's simple. What you're watching is people protecting their own prerogatives. Globalization, which is the opposite of nationalism, has caused an enormous transfer of wealth from the American middle class to what we used to call the third world, to other countries. American factories closed, but the jobs didn't go away. They just went to other countries. Now, some Americans got very rich from this. Many others got poorer. That's what happened. Rather than admit what actually happened, though, the people who got richer are trying to make the people who got poorer shut up and stop complaining about it. A borderless world has been hugely profitable for them. That's why they support it. Nationalism is their kryptonite, so they must stop it. So they scream racism and hope that nationalism will go away. Will it go away? Probably not. Because the core idea is appealing to people in all countries over all time. People want leaders who are, above all, on their side. They always have wanted that. They always will want that. That's what we know. What we don't know is what's going to happen in the elections tomorrow. We won't even guess. Nothing would surprise us. But we know what the real issues are because it's obvious. And we're going to spend the next hour talking about those issues. We're going to begin tonight on immigration with Ann Coulter. She's the author of Resistance is Futile, How the Trump-Hating Left Lost Its Collective Mind. Ann Coulter joins us tonight. Ann, thanks a lot for coming on.
Sure.
So you saw this piece in Politico today, not that you're cruising Politico, I'm sure, but it kind of stuck out. And in it, a background source informed Politico that Paul Ryan has been trying to stop Trump from talking about immigration because it's irrelevant, it's a peripheral issue. What he really ought to be talking about is Paul Ryan's great success with the tax bill that became law. If this isn't preemptive butt covering, I'm not sure what is.
Beyond that, it's just so completely wrong. I'm so happy Trump has taken over my party. No, that's the old loser Democratic, or rather Republican Party, running on tax cuts. I mean, half the country doesn't even pay taxes. You know that running on the economy is a loser because, for one thing, all of the left-wing commentators are saying Trump should be talking about the economy. Please talk about the economy. Don't talk about immigration. Number two, the only argument from their side that you just played, I guess, from Joe Scarborough, was to accuse people who are opposed to dumping millions of poor people on the country, driving down the wages of the working class and Joe Scarborough's maid, is to claim racism. You know, the left is so lucky that the poor countries to the south of us are Latin American countries, and we're not taking in, like, Poland's poor, or you know, Eastern Europe's poor, maybe gypsies. I don't know if he would consider gypsies darker, browner than us. It has nothing to do with race until they make it so.
So you're saying that if we were taking in, wait, just to be clear about what you're saying. So you're saying if we were taking in Eastern Europeans, then the left wouldn't get to claim racism. They'd have to think of some other reason.
Yes. Yes, no, our objection is dumping lots of poor people on the country is hurting the poor people already here and the working class already here, the low-skilled workers already here. I'd like to know how many of these, of Joe Scarborough's beloved brown people, live in the houses near him as opposed to come to clean his toilet and pool. The racism argument is, okay, I don't have an argument.
But are you struck by how much of, so there's a real economic argument, I think, to be had, which I would welcome having any time with anybody anywhere, over the effects of immigration and globalization on the country, and I think we should have that debate. But they short-circuit that debate by attacking the motives and character of the people on the other side. But does it strike you that they're doing it in order to protect their own pretty good deal, that they're getting their prerogatives?
Oh, absolutely. Mass low-wage immigration is terrific for rich people. Like I say, you get, you know, your house cleaned so cheap. You get to strut around like you're Martin Luther King. If you work on Wall Street, you get to put together all these global deals. Globalism is great for the rich, people who live on the coast, people who need who have a lot of servants. Right. You know, pool boy, nanny, somebody to pick up the kids. It's terrific for them. But again, for the poor people already here, and not just poor people, I mean, it goes up the scale. So you know, the working class gets pushed aside as well, and it shows Trump's magnificent political instincts, I think. Other than actually fulfilling his promises on building a wall and deporting illegal aliens, he's doing the best he can on these midterms. I love that his instincts are no, I have to keep talking about immigration.
That's right.
Little tip for the president, it would be so much better when you're running for re-election if you actually did the stuff that you've been promising to do for 3 years.
And if your own party agreed with you. Ann Coulter, thank you for that analysis. Great to see you today.
Thank you.
Lisa Booth is at the Independent Women's Voice. She's a senior fellow there, and she's been on this show many times in the past few weeks trying to help us come up to date on these elections. She joins us one last time for last-minute developments. What is happening in the final hours?
Well, and thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I've really enjoyed it. Well, Tucker, as you know, we've been following the Florida gubernatorial race, and Andrew Gillum is facing, he's at least surrounded by an FBI corruption investigation into the city of Tallahassee, where he is mayor, also facing a state probe regarding failure to disclose travel and gifts. Well, it turns out his intern is also having trouble with the law. Shelby Shoup, of course, made herself famous last week for this. Take a look.
You are supporting Nazis. Do you understand that?
Communism?
Yeah, I am.
Way more people do.
Pour your coffee on me. You, I will.
Than the Nazis?
What do you understand that fascism is here?
What is wrong?
Y'all understand
with you?
that Nazis are
wrong
here? I hope y'all realize that you are normalizing and enabling Nazis.
Right.
And you can film me. I don't give a Do you really care?
Yeah.
Do you?
Here, have a jacket.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's I have a jacket.
So you're saying that she was an intern for Gillum. Has he said anything about that?
You know, I'm not sure about that, but she has now been arrested and charged for battery with this incident with the college Republican. She was also wearing a communism pin, and she is a member of FSU's Students for Justice in Palestine. It's just some fun facts about Shelby. So she seems like a real peach. Well, and Tucker, we've also been following the Arizona Senate race. Now, Kirsten Sinema, of course, has come under fire for previous statements that she's made, her anti-war statements and activities, you know, and also that 2003 comment she made where she said she doesn't care if Americans join the Taliban. Well, she was asked point blank yesterday by NBC if she regrets those comments. Listen to what she had to say.
Do you regret that statement, though, at all?
Well, it was an offhand comment during an interview about a war that I believed was misguided and still believe is misguided. What Martha has chosen to do is run a very negative campaign based on false attacks and smears and lies. And that's her choice. But I think Arizonans are choosing the person that they believe shares their values and they believe will stand up for them.
She was asked not once but twice and refused to condemn or to say that she regretted those comments that she made. So Arizona voters should certainly keep that in mind. And also looking at the Georgia gubernatorial race, so there's been kind of this interesting video and photos being sent around and making their way around the internet of these Black Panthers in support of Stacey Abrams marching around the city of Atlanta. But look at what they are holding. They are holding, quote unquote, assault weapons and also Stacey Abrams for governor signs. But only one of those things Stacey Abrams wants to confiscate from them and also ban. And that is, of course, the quote unquote assault weapons. She, as a member of the state house, actually co-sponsored legislation to both ban assault weapons and also to confiscate them. Yet she has been on TV making the national rounds, sort of refusing to admit the fact that she did such a thing.
Unbelievable.
Right.
Lisa Booth, thank you for
Thank
that
you, Tucker.
and for all of your updates over the past few weeks.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Tucker.
Underdog Democrats like Beto O'Rourke are very popular in the press. They get a ton of coverage. There are some impressive Republican challengers, though, and they're not getting much attention at all. We're going to change that for one night only. Michigan Senate candidate John James